My name is Erin. I work over in the Career Development Center on campus, and today we're joined by 3 alumni who have lived and worked in New York for varying amounts of time over the past decade. They'll be sharing their experiences and will be with finding jobs in New York City, finding apartments in the city, and how they've taken advantage of what the city has to offer day to day. So let me introduce you to Jake Kerrigan, who graduated in 2016. He majored in accounting and finance and is currently a licensed real estate salesperson for Compass. Catherine Costello graduated in 2013 and is currently a marketing manager for Indeed, and she majored in food marketing at St. Joe's. And finally, Tim Costanza graduated in 2010. He majored in international relations and is currently the founder and executive director of Bridge Preparatory Charter School. So Jake, Catherine, and Tim, I'd like to thank each of you for being here today. Now we're going to kick off the panel. As questions come up throughout the session, feel free to enter them in the chat, or if you're in the forum theater, we will answer your questions at the end of the session. So why don't we begin by having each panelist tell us a little bit about themselves, what influenced your decision to move to New York? Jake, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody, I'm Jake Kerrigan. I am currently coming to you live from a little balcony here in Germany, actually. My fiance is also a St. Joe's grad, and she works for SAP, which is a big technology company. They are actually headquartered in Germany. So today, this whole week, they invited her out. And so I was like, I'm going too. So it's crazy, you know. I'm in Germany right now, kind of because of St. Joe's and all of the opportunities and connections that they offer to all of us. While I was at St. Joe's, I studied finance and accounting. I got my first job out of school through the Career Development Center at PwC, one of the big 4 accounting firms. They did a great job preparing me, helping me get an internship, first of all, and then a full-time job there. I worked for PwC for a year, found out that it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And so then I switched over to real estate, and now I help people find apartments in New York City, either renting them or buying them. So it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully I can be a good resource for all of you.
Absolutely. Catherine, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Costello. I am a 2013 St. Joe's grad. I am married also to a Hawk, so go Hawk mates. I graduated with a food marketing major and did a couple internships with food companies while I was at St. Joe's. And when I was graduated, I was hired from a job I got out of a career fair with Breakthrough Beverage, which is a wine and spirits distributor based in Pennsylvania, but they've expanded throughout the whole country. So for a couple years after that, after graduation, I was in field sales, selling wine to bars and restaurants in the Pennsylvania area, Bucks County, Delaware County, and Philadelphia, which was really fun. But I grew up outside of New York City. My whole family is here. And I always knew that I wanted to get back to this area to be closer to them. So I was always kind of looking for a new job, got a job with Breakthrough Beverage still in Connecticut, did that for a few months and really realized that I was kind of done with sales for a bit and wanted to move into the marketing space. So then I jumped over to Indeed, moved to New York, and have been here ever since.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Costanza. I'm a 2010 St. Joe's grad, and I come from a family of Hawks. My sister and brother-in-law and that whole side of the world of their family are Hawks. I am not married to a Hawk. I'm the only one that is not married to a Hawk, so like a little ding there. But my wife is an honorary Hawk, and our new son is probably a future Hawk. I am also, I think, have a little bit of a different career story, right? You heard I was an international relations major at St. Joe's, and then you may have also heard that I'm the founder and executive director of a public charter school here in New York City. And those two things usually don't jive because they are totally different career paths. And I thank St. Joe's for that. And I'll tell you the quick and dirty of that one. I was an international relations major. I did a really awesome internship through St. Joe's in Leuven, Belgium with the European Parliament through a partnership program with the Irish Institute. It was a fantastic experience. It was like probably one of the best experiences of my life. And I came back from that program realizing that I didn't think that was what I wanted to do with my life. And so as you guys can imagine, my dad and mom were not pleased with that answer. And I was really fortunate to be accepted as a Teach for America Corps member in Greater Philadelphia, where I taught high school special education for 4 years. I served as a director of special education at Magnet High School in South Philadelphia. And I was also teaching before the school closed in West Philadelphia at University City High School. My connection back to New York, I'm born and raised here in New York. And it was time for me to come home. And I was really fortunate to transition my time out of the classroom and out of the school setting to work at the New York City Department of Education central headquarters for at the time Mayor Mike Bloomberg and his policy team. I stayed there centrally for several years, working with the transition between Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor de Blasio and his team, doing some really cool work around strategy for schools across New York City. But once again, my bucket was not full. I missed the school setting, and I embarked on this journey that I am in now, founding a public charter school specifically designed for students with dyslexia or language-based learning differences. We are the first public charter school in New York State and one of only 6 nationwide with this focus. And so that has been the journey that I've been on for the past 4 years. We started Bridge Prep with just this pen. I carry it with me every day. It's the first pen I wrote the proposal for the school. And here I am in my office now with a living, breathing school with kids, teachers, and staff of about 200 students in grades 1 through 5. My work is not your traditional principal level work. I serve as the superintendent and the principal of our whole district. And so I range from doing things like managing our multi-million-dollar budget, engaging with our elected officials across New York City, to going in and I do lunch duty. After this, I'm about to go do lunch duty because I really like to be present with my teachers and staff and kids. And I also serve in a variety of other roles. I live in this community, so there's no greater joy that I've had than be able to found a school for students like me. I am a student with a disability. I always will be a student with a disability. And so founding a school for students like me in my community, 7 minutes away from where I grew up, has been a dream come true. I'm currently actually diving in and being part of a task force here in New York State of select stakeholders that really focus on how we support our differing learners with the New York State Education Department, which is really cool because it gets to take me to places like all across New York State, presenting at conferences. I'm actually going to a private school in Buffalo shortly to really talk about like how what we're doing here at Bridge Prep, which is so unique and so special, can be transferred to all of our public schools across New York State. So I'm really happy to be here and thank you all for having me.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much, Tim. That sort of leads us into our next question, which is how did you land your job in New York City? And what resources did you use to find or start this opportunity? Tim, do you want to start this time? I know you briefly touched on that.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, so like a little, without going through the whole details again, I'll skip to the part where I left Philadelphia, where I left the classroom and it was time for me to come home. I had been at St. Joe's. I had been in Philadelphia through St. Joe's. I did my grad work and my master's degree at University of Pennsylvania. And it was time for me to come back home. But I had a really hard time leaving the classroom because like, if any of you have done a career change or like a change in your work, or will do that, because we all do it, or a lot of us do it, it's a really difficult thing. And, you know, you lean on people you trust and you lean on people that like know like what your foundation is made of. And I actually did that with an SJU grad who was also worked with me in Teach for America. She was a little bit older. She was actually my orientation leader at St. Joe's, which was like a total full circle moment. And she connected me with some folks in New York at the Central Department of Education team and said like, listen, I know your skill set. I know what you're passionate about. if you want to go home, like take a look at this opportunity. And it really worked out perfectly. Leaving my students was really difficult, and leaving Philadelphia in general. My sister was still at St. Joe's at the time that I left. And so there was like, it was a really tough move, but it launched my career into a totally different place. And so, you know, what I got at St. Joe's, that like those core values, right, of true to oneself, but also like really being mission driven, has guided me not only through the move from my first part of my career, but like how I continue to drive forward.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing, Tim. Catherine, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, it's so great to hear all the work that you've been able to do since leaving St. Joe's. It seems like you're doing some great stuff in New York. So that's awesome. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think one of the main prioritization items that you should focus on when you're looking to find a job is networking. I know everyone always says this, but it is so important. It is networking that allowed me to move from my job in Pennsylvania to Connecticut for that brief stint that I had there. I had, become close with someone who was in training and development in Connecticut. They reached out when there was an opening and I was able to get the job. And then when I was looking to switch industries, and I think this is a value that I really got with the St. Joe's holistic education. And although a lot of the classes that you have to take are sometimes seemingly irrelevant, it's really important to be able to have an open mind and understand that like there's not just one thing that you're going to have to focus on in your career. So when I was looking to get out of sales, I had a neighbor who I lived next to, was friends with, and he started talking to me about Indeed and how much he loved it. And just for everyone on the call, if you're not familiar, Indeed is a job website where companies go and post jobs and you can apply to jobs on the website. I hope you all use it in your job searches in the future. And I was like, Indeed, I sell wine. This is not my area of expertise. It's not even really something I'm interested in. And so I was very skeptical. And after like hearing him out and listening to him for a while about how much he loves the company, I did have an open mind and decided to pursue a career there. And 5 years later, I've been here ever since. And it was the best thing that I ever did. So I think just having an open mind and keeping an eye on networking and building your community and like giving back to people. So when your time comes and you need to ask for that job, they'll have an open mind to you.
Absolutely. Networking is so important. All right, Jake, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I am from Long Island. So I think what we all have in common here is that we're originally from the New York area. I graduated in 2016, so I think I'm the baby here. But that drive to come back to New York is what really led me down my entire path. And just to be a little bit honest with you, it's a little bit honest. Getting to New York from St. Joe's is more difficult, I would say, than getting a job in Philly from St. Joe's, just kind of naturally how that happens. So like Catherine was saying, you really want to prioritize networking, not just with like people that can eventually get you a job, but with the people that are in this room right now. Just look up and down the participant list. If you're in the Forum Theater, look around the room. These are people that you want to be familiar with. And we'll kind of talk about it later when it comes to moving to New York. It's going to be helpful to have people that also want to move to New York with you when that time comes. Sorry, ambulance going by out here. Do they still call it the Career Development Center?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the Career Development Center was my key to all of this, to getting back to New York. The people there are really dedicated and passionate about getting Hawks into jobs. So you should really utilize this tool. It's there for you every day. Yes, you have to go somewhere during free period. Yes, it takes a little bit of effort. But if you're not ready to put in the effort, it's going to be hard to get to New York. But I can assure you, even if you're not like us, like if you're not from there, you don't, and maybe you're like, I think I want to live in New York. Trust me, it's a great idea. You're going to love it, and it's very much worth the effort.
Totally. Thank you so much for promoting our office. We'd love to hear that. We would love to meet with you if you're interested in, learning a little bit more about networking. Definitely utilize our office. All right, so that brings us to our next question, which we also just basically talked about, but how did networking help you land your job? How did you start to establish a professional network once you began working? So more so the second question. Once you started, how did you develop, especially in a time of COVID, how did you develop that professional network with your colleagues? And Catherine, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, definitely. So I did speak about it earlier, but developing a professional network is very important. And I just candidly am a person that hates networking. I am not like into a coffee chat. It's not like my thing. But what I found is that everyone needs to really find the type of networking that works for them. And one of the ways that I see as a great resource to build my network is like the rapport that I've built over time, like in the office. So working when you're doing your internships or even in classes and working with your fellow students, building that rapport of like being friendly, being collaborative, being a self-starter. And people will remember that because that's a unique skill that not everyone has. And that is what has really, I think, propelled me in my job search as well as my career, in that like, maybe I'm not going to be the friendliest person at a networking happy hour, but while I'm working with these people, having like that good rapport and really showing that I am a hard worker and I'm able to deliver is going to probably resonate with people more than what you would, having fun with someone. So while that is great, and I did get one job through a friend. So I think having an open mind about your network as well, and not just seeing like, oh, I want to network with this higher up at this company, but really using like your community and your friends and your parents' friends and your professors to tap those resources would be my advice.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Tim, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would actually definitely echo what I just heard from Catherine. And I'm gonna double on it and say that like I'm also not I don't love networking. My family makes fun of me that like I talk so much and I hate small talk. But it kind of is for me in my role now, it's like crucial, right? Like everything is about networking, everything is about people, everything is about relationship building. I would say that like it all for me starts with, and I would like strongly recommend you have like a very serious conversation with yourself about like what it is you're really passionate about, and not let anything get in the way of like going for it. And I know that sounds like this like very big like pep talk. Yeah, go for it. Like you should definitely do it. But there are so many times like in my professional journey that like I've caught myself saying like, I don't think I'm qualified for that, or I don't think I can do that. And so like, let me wait my turn. And I think that being pushy is good. Advocating for yourself is appropriate. And asking a lot of questions, which like, especially as like a young person entering the workforce, can be really intimidating. And I'll tell you this because like the people I hire now, most of them ask me the most questions. Most of them challenge me in my responses. So really being thoughtful about like, what you want, and also being totally okay with like the feeling of I'm not quite sure. And I speak to that from personal experience. I was super scared to come back from my internship at St. Joe's and say, I don't want to do this as my career, but I felt that I was too far in to change. And I'll tell you, like, very candidly, like I had a really amazing job at Central DOE, like set up, like great career, did a lot of great networking, got my hands dirty, dove in, attended late meetings, like did all the things that like you think happen when you're young in a career and young in an industry, and it worked. But I still knew myself, and I had that conversation with myself to like, I'm not where I need to be. And I took a huge chance of leaving that job to found something, to do something that I felt really strongly about. And it paid off. And I will say that people recognize that. People recognize passion, people recognize sincerity, and people really recognize when someone's willing to be a hard worker. In this time we're in right now, COVID, post-COVID, mid-COVID, I'm seeing that there's some challenges with folks entering or re-entering the workforce, about the desire to work and the desire to really get back in, and it's really hard. I have like some of the best teachers in New York City, and they're struggling like getting reacclimated to teaching, and getting reacclimated to the school building. And so, you know, one of those other things is like committing to yourself that like you're gonna, when you do something, when you take the step, that you're gonna do it 100%, that you're really ready to do that, because you also remembering that the world, as big as New York is, it's really small. And that like in the industry, like we all talk to each other, right? Like I can connect with other superintendents. And so like you represent yourself always. And there's gonna be a space where like, if you aren't true to yourself, it's gonna show. And like, you don't want that to carry with you all the way through.
No, not at all. That's a great point.
And
Jake, is there-
just to piggyback off something that Tim said, in that not being afraid to apply for a job, just as like indeed, you know, knowledge is always whirling in the background, but a lot of job seekers are hesitant to apply for a job where they don't meet all of the requirements stated in the job description, especially women. I think with men, it's like they look for about 75% of qualifications that they have. And with women, we likely won't apply to a job until we have at least 90% of the qualifications listed in the job description. So this is a huge barrier that we just create for ourselves. And while it's important to apply for jobs that are relevant to your interests and your experience, like Tim just said, like he knows all of the other superintendents in New York. He might not be hiring for what you have to offer, but he might know someone who is. You never know what conversation you're going to start. So just keep that in mind, and don't put barriers up for yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that. Jake, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. And I forgot to mention Tim, by the way. I love your story. It's like very incredible. It's also funny. I love small talk. I love networking. It's like my favorite thing in the world. And I think that's why I got into real estate. Just because that's what I do all day. I meet brand new people for the first time ever seeing this human in person. And then you have to talk to them and fill space, you know, while you're walking around New York City looking at apartments. So I thought that was funny. One thing that I will say that I think is really important is, you know, the networking apps and sites like LinkedIn and stuff like that. But I would avoid using them as like your primary conduit of connecting with people. It's more so like, I kind of think of it as like the poke feature on Facebook. I don't even know if they have that anymore, if anyone uses Facebook anymore. But it's a good way to like be on top of mind with other people, kind of like reminding people that you exist and this is what I'm doing in the world and this is what I'm interested in. LinkedIn is perfect for that. And I do a lot of that in my own work. But what's not going to happen is you connecting with people and then doing nothing. Nothing's going to come from that. Keep people updated. Post about what you're doing, what you're looking for, what your interests are. So people, when, they have some downtime at work, it seems to be like the socially acceptable thing in a lot of offices to kind of like scroll through LinkedIn in place of like Twitter or Instagram. And they'll see and they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that person. They were at St. Joe's, right? Yeah. Let me, I have this role. Let me see, maybe, that happens a lot. But again, it's just like a little spark. It's not the whole, thing. You really have to make a concerted effort on your part.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have most of our students are on Handshake, which is a similar platform to LinkedIn. So definitely important to keep staying up to date on messages you get from employers and just actively seeking opportunities there as well. Awesome. So we'll kind of pivot a little bit. And Jake, I'll start with you as the neighborhood realtor. What advice do you have for others who are looking for an apartment in New York City? Are there any neighborhoods you might recommend for someone looking to move for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is coming back to what I said earlier about look around right now, look who else is in the room. New York is the most expensive city in the United States, officially overtaking San Francisco. So apartments are expensive. And the easiest way to move to New York City and afford the rent is to live with roommates. It's going to make life a lot easier for you. New York is so expensive because not only people from the Northeast, not only people like us who are from the area, not only people from the United States, but like this kid over here in Germany is like, maybe I'll live in New York one day, So there's everyone in the world is coming to New York and you're competing with them. So that's why the prices are really high. I've heard plenty of stories about people coming by themselves, finding people on Facebook groups, and there's a lot of different websites now, like and apps like Roomy that are New York City focused. So not to worry if you think you might be alone in the process, but it will make life so much easier if there are some people that you're familiar with who you all kind of share this common goal of, listen, let's get to New York. That's what I did. I moved from St. Joe's right to New York City right after I graduated. I was from there, but I found 3 guys in my accounting class that were like, yeah, that sounds good. And we kind of, for 3 years together, we're like, what steps should we take? We'd talk about it. And we went through this whole like job process as a team, which was kind of nice. And then we all got a 4-bedroom apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And we lived together there for like 4 years. We only split up with COVID, small tier, but it was a really great experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, you definitely have to find your group of people, and maybe that's even somebody who's on this Zoom call right now who's also interested in looking. Tim, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and I will say, like, I don't have the most interesting New York City living story because I was born and raised here in the city, in New York City. I lived in Philadelphia after college on my own. I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, where I had a roommate. Then I moved to a new apartment where I lived by myself. And so I had this like sweet setup where my rent was super cheap. And I made that conversation of like, if I'm going to move back to New York, what am I going to do? And I moved back home. I did the terrifying thing of moving back home to my childhood home after living on my own. Say it again.
Where is your childhood home?
I'm about to get there because I'm about to tell you what not to do. And it's not to avoid, it is not to avoid, not to always like listen to what you hear out there about certain New York City neighborhoods. I'm born, raised, proud, bred, Staten Island, New York. That's where I am right now.
Love it.
I, after like living at home for like a brief stint, I was like, I have to get back to my way. And I was able to like get an apartment by myself in Staten Island that I was able to afford. And so the one good thing I would say about moving to New York, first thing, don't listen to what anybody tells you. New York's not dead. We're very much alive. We're very much alive and in a really interesting place as a city for like a rebirth. I would say that some of the neighborhoods that people will tend to tell you, or boroughs that people will tend to tell you, are too expensive. Things are changing. It's still expensive. If I had to go and live on my own in Manhattan right now, it just wouldn't be. It would probably cost me the same thing that I pay on the mortgage of the house I just bought. And I bought a house here in Staten Island. One little piece of advice with New York, it's back to like how I've been thinking about jobs, right? Like it has everything. There are neighborhoods that have absolutely everything in all 5 boroughs, and even in the spaces outside of New York City, Hoboken and the burbs like to the north of New York City, even parts of Long Island, right? There's something for everybody. And so you don't have to settle. It's really about like, what are you looking for? Just like, what are you looking for in a career? What are you looking for in life? Like big part of that is, where do you live? What are you looking for? What do you love? I was not like the biggest, I grew up in Staten Island, which is not the like most urban part of New York City. So like I didn't mind living in what felt like the suburbs while still having access to all things New York City. Some of my friends like couldn't do that. They were city folks. They wanted to experience that. So it really is, what are you looking for? Because New York truly does have everything. And don't say no to Staten Island, even if you're not a suburb person and you want to talk about Staten Island. I'm here for it. I'm like Staten Island versus the world. So we're ready.
Sounds like Tim's your guy if you're interested in living in Staten Island. Awesome. Catherine, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I feel like I've had a somewhat privileged experience moving in New York, because by the time I moved here, I was moving in with my now husband. So we kind of were able to split rent, which is always a plus. Never have to, similar to what Jake said, like avoid living alone at all costs because it's so expensive. But it is so worth it being able to be in New York, living, here, having access to everything you want at all hours of the day, being able to get anything delivered at any time of the day is something that we are very spoiled with. And I wouldn't give it up for anything. But I've lived in 2 apartments since I got here. One in the Gramercy area. Now I live on the Upper East Side, so both Manhattan based. And I was lucky enough, I grew up in Westchester, New York, but I had a close family person who lived on the Upper West Side. So I've spent like a lot of time there as well. And she had like an amazing rent controlled apartment. It was a great deal. She sold it. It still breaks my heart. But anyway, I would say if you're looking for an apartment, once you have your roommate set up, or if you can live alone, my advice to you is to just try to not be picky. The things that you think are must-haves when you're living somewhere else are easily given up. For example, when I moved to this new apartment, like in January, I was very against it because it didn't have outside space. And at my previous apartment, we had a balcony. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to like this. I'm going to hate it. And I love it. It's been almost a year and I don't want to move ever. We just renewed our lease. So don't be picky, and be flexible with your must-haves. And you barely like spend time in your apartment anyway, because you're always just out doing things, exploring New York. So it's really not that important. And also the timing here is a lot faster. I'm sure Jake could talk for hours on this, but like once you're ready to look, be ready to commit like that day or the day after, and just,
Oh yeah,
it goes fast.
100%.
Oh, wow. Quick turnaround time.
where on the Upper East Side do you live?
I'm on 67th and Park.
Nice. I am on 75th and First.
Oh my gosh, I love it here. I was very anti Upper East Side until I got here, and I love it so much. So
Isn't it great? Yeah.
yes,
My whole family is from the Upper East Side. My grandparents moved to New York City from Ireland way back in the day, got their first apartment on the Upper East Side. And family's still living here.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's got a real great neighborhood vibe. For any of you moving to Manhattan, please consider the Upper East Side. It's a lovely place and very accessible to the rest of New York.
Yeah.
I'll show some Upper East Side love too. My wife, when I met my now wife, she was also living in the Upper East Side, and I admit that like Manhattan's not my favorite place. It's a lot going on there. I loved the Upper East Side. She lived on 84th and Lex.
Oh,
And it
great
was
spot.
super convenient to get to everywhere, even for me to get all the way back down to the ferry, the free ferry to Staten Island. For those of you that are wondering, the free mode of transportation.
Berries too.
I'm big on the Upper East Side.
That's awesome. To talk about transportation really quick, did any of you ever have cars? What would you recommend? Subway, ferry?
Yeah, do not bring
Walking.
your car.
Do not bring a car.
LA.
So we actually have a car in New York, and
Whoa.
I have to say, so we brought it in during COVID because we just wanted a way to get out of the city without being on public transportation, and have had it in the city for over a year now. And we initially had a parking garage. We got a great deal. It was about $300 a month, which is a great deal in New York
Great.
for a parking garage.
Like
And now on the beautiful Upper East Side, we park on the street. And with COVID, there's, not to get into the details, but you have to sometimes move your car in New York because they clean the streets. And that's been reduced to only once a week. And in my neighborhood, you don't actually have to move your car, you just sit in your car. So every Friday from 11:30 to 12:30, I am sitting in my car on the street. But other than that, it's really like the benefits outweigh the negatives. But unless you're flexible and able to do that, it's really tough to have a car in the city.
I'm a driver. I've always had my car, and again, that's part of the nature of where I've lived, right? Like I have the ability to, like, in the apartment I've lived in Staten Island, and even now in my house, like I have driveway. I have great street parking, and it's not the case maybe like parts of Manhattan where like you have that easy convenience. I remember so clearly when I lived in Queen Village in Philadelphia, I used to have to do that move of my car, and I would be running and be like, oh my God, I have to move, or PPA is going to get me. There's parts of New York, other parts of New York, other than Manhattan, where like Queens, for example, there's some good parking in parts of Queens, parts of Brooklyn. And I would just advise, if moving to New York, keep abreast. And this is good feedback, not just about transportation in general, and just in general about moving to a place, to a city. Like immerse yourself in the local issues. Know like what's going on in New York right now. Like there's a lot of talk about congestion pricing. Talk about geeking out. I'm about to geek out real hard here. Congestion pricing for folks in the outer boroughs that drive into Manhattan. So my wife frequently for her job commutes into Manhattan from Staten Island, where she has to drive. There's additional tolls and fees that you're gonna have to pay. So just like that's something that's on the pipeline, and just keep it immersed to yourself. Like know your neighborhood, know the parking situation, know where those garages are, right? Know like what is this gonna look like? Because that may impact your decision. Like I remember when I lived in Philadelphia, I needed a place to have a car because I came back to New York a lot. And I didn't want to rely on the train. So like I needed my car, not for work, but just for life. So knowing that is like doing that thinking before you move is important.
Yeah. And with that said, like to Jake's point, you definitely don't need a car in New York unless like we use it for personal reasons, but there's plenty, like we could definitely, and we did navigate for like almost 5 years in the city without a car. So you definitely don't need it. But it is a convenience.
Can I do another advice piece here? Sorry. I'm gonna
Absolutely.
when you're interviewing for a job in New York, and this was news to me, but my wife pushes this on me a lot, is ask about like, does the company, like what's the deal with transportation? Like some companies that like are based in New York and require you to travel a lot, like will supplement and provide a stipend or a supplement for your car. And that's like something that, again, I work in the public sector. Total news to me. Like I was like, what do you mean? I was taking the train to Mill Basin at the end of Brooklyn at 8 o'clock at night. And there are some companies that like will get you the car or provide you a stipend for your vehicle. Stuff to ask when you're interviewing, particularly if your job or your industry requires you to be mobile and move throughout New York City, the 5 boroughs, Long Island, upstate, and New Jersey.
Yeah. Also, on that note, there is a similar program in New York for the subway. My company previously offered, it's basically like a tax-free subway purchasing offer. So like a 401k for your transportation. But that's an option as well. So there are discounts that a lot of corporations will provide if they're based in New York.
That's great. Definitely an important question to ask when you're doing job interviews and things like that. All right, I'm going to move us into our next question, which is, what challenges did you initially face when you made the move to New York? And what are some classic rookie mistakes to avoid when moving to New York City? Any pieces of advice? Jake, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk specifically about mistakes that I see all the time with finding apartments. So first of all, you have to set your expectations realistically. So there's one website in New York, which is the go-to for apartments. It's called streeteasy.com. It's one of our competitors, but I'm just going to tell you to use them because it's by far like the best resource and tool. You can go on there right now and you can see the different neighborhoods, where you want to live, how much it's going to be. And it could change your expectations a lot. You know, you could be like, yeah, you know, I want to live in Manhattan. And then you see a studio, they're usually like $1,800 to $2,000 a month. So like, hey, I don't know if I can do that with this salary that I'm going to be getting at this place, hopefully. That's again why roommates are so important. With my 3 roommates, we lived in this 4-bedroom apartment in a doorman building, and I was paying $1,400 a month. So that is how drastically it can change from paying $2,000, $1,800 for, by the way, not a nice apartment, little cube, to if you have people, you get in nicer buildings, you get better apartments, you get nicer things, appliances that were like made in this century, which is nice. Not having to worry about little critters or anything. Again, essential. And then just a COVID thing that I'm seeing, which is a huge mistake. With everything that's happening that we're doing virtually, like this meeting, for instance, do not do your apartment search virtually. You need to go there. You need to be in the apartment. You need to stand there and see it. A lot of things are misrepresented online. It's just kind of the way it is in New York. Until you're standing in the apartment and see it, you have not seen the apartment. A lot of stuff online is made to look very nice. You show up and it's like, oh, well, this was taken on the brightest day of the year with extra wide zoom lens. Like, so, and what I'm seeing is a lot of people seeing the pictures, reaching out to me and being like, hey, I'll take this apartment. And I'm like, okay, I'd recommend coming to see it. And like, before I came to Germany, I helped these 2 kids from Taiwan that wanted to move to New York. They couldn't be there physically, but you can probably, if you're in like the Philadelphia Northeast. That's another great thing about New York. It's just so connected. You can jump on a megabus for $10-12. You can take a local SEPTA train to New Jersey Transit to Penn Station for like $30. You can really ball out and take an Amtrak for like $80. You could fly, you know, you could drive. There's so many different ways to get to New York. Get up here, walk around the neighborhoods, see your apartments before you sign the dotted line.
And to your last point, Jake, oh, sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to cut you off. They should be doing that. Like, that's a very quick turnaround time from when they express interest in whatever the place is. Okay.
So just a quick piece on that. Like, basically an apartment becomes vacant at the end of the month. The people move out, their lease is over, the landlord goes in with their little cleaning crew and their maintenance crew, they fix it up, and now it's vacant. And what they want to do is get someone in there ASAP. So typically, if you're looking for, say, most people graduate in like May, right? And then start jobs in like August. So let's say if you're looking for an August 1st move-in date, you will only start to be able to see apartments that are available for August 1 starting July 1st, which sounds crazy. And it is compared to most other parts of the country. You don't do it this way, but New York is so like instant gratification, like let's go. It's like, all right, these people are out, who wants it now, you know? So I have people that it's so funny, like in the summer, I'll get people reaching out to me, be like, hey, anything for January 1st yet? And I'm like, that is like light years away, New York time, you know? What a lot of people do, you get with your roommates, hopefully, you pick a weekend, you all come on like a Friday, you look at a couple apartments on Friday, set your expectations, see a ton of apartments on Saturday. And if something looks good, grab it and you could move in 2 weeks later. That's how quick it can go.
That's great advice. Thank you. Tim, go ahead.
This is gonna be my shortest answer. So mistakes that are made and advice to avoid them is there's a lot that New York has. It's massively overwhelming in the most beautiful, intense, emotionally draining, exhausting way. Don't rush. It's not going anywhere. You will have so much time to really immerse yourself in everything that New York has to offer. But there is this feeling and excitement that comes with moving to New York. And I'll say for me, moving back to New York, that I got caught up in. I had so many things that I wanted to do, and there's this and this and this and this happening every night. And I burnt out a little bit when I first got back. And I know that this is like a feeling that folks who are not from New York and have this like, I can't wait to just dive into like all the New York that there is. There's no rush. Get yourself settled. Get yourself in a good place with you, and before you start like diving in. And it's totally okay to explore. You know, if you're not moving with somebody, I acknowledge that some of you may move here like solo, like don't know anybody in New York. That can also be super intimidating. I am really fortunate that like I came back to a massive network of people, right? That were like stayed here and we're still here or we're coming back. But I acknowledge that like some folks come solo, and that's even more intimidating because New York is big and busy. And this like notion of like, it doesn't sleep, right? Like it's so true. Like, you know, Catherine, you said before about like these 24-hour delis, bodegas. I cannot tell you how much I missed getting a coffee whenever I want when I was living in Philadelphia. But I also was like remembering like, did I really need to like get coffee at like midnight before I like went home? And like it can catch up with you. So like ease into it. New York's not going anywhere. And as I mentioned, like I think we all know, it's like on this like total amazing, beautiful cultural rebirth. That there's really exciting things for you to get in the mix on at your time.
Yeah, definitely. Catherine, anything you want to speak to there?
I have made so many mistakes. It's hard to, I could have filled like an hour on this one question alone. But a couple things just to piggyback off like the moving into New York advice. Don't buy furniture until you know where you're going to live, because a lot of suburban furniture stores make furniture that's just too big for your apartment. And like your sectional couch is not going to be productive in your studio. If you can avoid moving in like June or July, it's as Jake said, like that is prime time. I've been lucky enough to have like a January lease and a March lease, and it has really like allowed us to take a breath when we're looking to move. And one thing that I try and do, if you know you're going to be in New York for longer, try and negotiate a 2-year lease term. So your rent doesn't raise after your first year of lease. That's been just something that like has helped us stay in our places for longer. And then not on the real estate side, again, you got to be flexible with your must-haves. I am a big walker. I love walking in New York. That's, I think, one of my favorite things about living in the city is you can walk out your door and you never know what you're going to see, what celebrity you're going to see, what interesting interaction you're going to have, what fun store you're going to find, where you'll end up. And that's the best part of living in New York. So walk everywhere. And just on an unrelated note, never go to a grocery store on a Sunday night, because like if you think that like Grand Central at rush hour is bad, you have never seen aggressive New Yorkers until you've been to like a Trader Joe's on a Sunday. So do your grocery shopping on off nights and get everything delivered. But most importantly, like be patient with yourself. You will take the subway the wrong direction. You will get lost. You will go to the wrong bar and realize that your friends are at a different bar. Like it happens. And just being patient with yourself and having fun with your mistakes and just like living it up it's all worth it.
Absolutely. Sounds like a very exciting time in the city. Coming into that next point, sort of, what's your favorite part about living there? I know you sort of just mentioned it, Catherine, but anything specific that you'd like to highlight?
I have a great answer for this. I answer this every day. Real quick, it's just that every day that I wake up, I have no idea what is going to happen. There was one night where there's this restaurant on the Upper East Side where, you know, every day I try a different place, and it would literally take 7 years. Someone did this math. It would take 7 years to try every restaurant just on the Upper East Side. So take New York City, and it's like exponential. But the other night, someone was like, have you ever tried Georgian food? And I was like from the state near Florida, like Georgia. They're like, no, like the country. I'm like, oh, you're right. Of course. So one night I went to a Georgian restaurant and had Georgian food, and it was amazing. It's just stuff like that. You're just going to end up in situations where you never would have thought you would be there. And there's just something so fun about that, and spontaneous, and being able to experience it while you're working for, you know, a great company, and just living in a great city with just amazing diversity and so many people around you. And I do also just want to say, if you are, just wanting to move to New York City alone, it's doable. You can do it. I mean, think of these kids in Germany or in Taiwan that I was talking about, who like don't even speak English. They're coming here alone, getting off a plane, coming to me and being like, apartment, I need one. You are light years ahead of some people. It may not feel like it. It's easy to get overwhelmed, but just know that it's very possible. And don't let the intimidation prevent you from moving here. It will be worth it. And you will love it.
Yeah, definitely. Catherine or Tim, I want to be mindful of our time, but is there anything, I have a couple of audience Q&As coming through. Anything either of you would like to say to that as well?
I'll just piggyback off what Jake said. That's also my favorite part about living in New York. It's always an adventure, and you never know what you're going to get. You could end up, having the best dinner of your life, or end up going to see SNL. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, but having an open mind and just adventuring and just having the most fun you'll ever have it's just, New York is fun, and you should all come here.
I'll answer some. I see 2 questions in the chat are about like adjusting and transitioning. Joseph's question of like adjusting as being a college student in Philadelphia, like readjusting when I went back to New York. I will definitely say I struggled with that. And I struggled with it because of the pace. Philadelphia is not slow paced by any means. But compared to New York, the pace felt a little slow. The things we've heard everybody talking about it here, like things move quick in New York. And there is a sense that like if you're a hard worker, right? You work hard, you stay late at the office, you work on the weekends. Like, I found that more people did that here in New York. That was a little bit of the norm. This like workaholic type thing. It's real here. And so like I had to readjust that, like that was the norm. And like, I'm like that by nature, but like there was a period where I wasn't like that when I was living in Philadelphia. I felt a little bit laid back. So that was a tough adjustment. And I can imagine that that's a similar adjustment to the question that Alessia asked about like living in the suburb and like transitioning to this like more urban area, the pace feels different. Like you're hearing sirens and ambulances at like 3 a.m. There were times in Philly when I was even living in like not a slow part of town that like it was quiet. It was super quiet. It's always moving. New York's always moving, so like that could be like a difficult adjustment, especially if you're coming from a place where you grew up or where you work and move, where things are a little slower.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for answering that, Tim. Another question, to go back to the fun things to do. Is there anything inexpensive,
Totally.
fun activities that you would recommend students, try out while they're there?
Parks are free. Central Park, amazing. Great parks in all the other boroughs as well. Parks are free. Walking is free. It's just like, just get out there and experience it.
Yeah.
But like Tim was kind of saying, there is so much going on, and that's why your apartment is pretty important, because at the end of the day, you want to come home somewhere where you feel like you can reset and recharge. It needs to be a place that doesn't bring you extra anxiety. You know, with all the stuff going on in New York, you need just a place where you can come home and totally just zen out and reset.
Absolutely. Catherine, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I love parks, walking. There are a lot of museums in the city. Like the Met is donation only if you live in New York, so you can go and see like amazing exhibits at the Met. A lot of museums have like free Fridays once a month, so museums, and there's guaranteed almost always a happy hour somewhere in New York. So if you're looking to go to like a bar or a restaurant, if you do your research, you can always find somewhere that's offering like a cheaper option. And I think just to some of the questions in the chat about adjusting, you definitely will miss like your car, and the suburb life is a lot easier than in New York. It's definitely a grind, but once you get used to it, and if you're like, I found that all the things that I was having like trouble with when I moved in, like I don't know why I keep talking about groceries, but like carrying my groceries a mile from like the grocery store back to my apartment, like you can find something that's a solution. So like now I get them delivered, but before I didn't know that. And I was like getting a workout, carrying like a bag lady, but it's just, there's always a solution if you just keep thinking about like what you want. And I feel like just to Joseph's question of adjusting as a student in Philly, like I miss the New York tap water was something that I had a really hard time with, because the Philly tap water tastes terrible. And I was just like, what is this? I gotta move. I can't go to St. Joe's anymore. But adjusting to that when you return back to the city was great. And then the public transportation in Philly too, like there are a lot of things that I love Philadelphia as a city. It's so amazing, but New York has just a lot more like robust systems like public transportation. So it's a little bit easier in some ways.
Well, it is 12:01. I made my way through most of my questions. I am curious though, if you guys can speak to how city living has changed since COVID, and maybe more recently in the past few months, but as well as the beginning. What was that like for you? Anyone? Feel free to jump in.
It was, I mean, I'm sure as the experience was for everyone, it was absolutely wild to see all the changes. But I feel like New York has adjusted very well. Just bring your mask everywhere. Bring your vaccine cards everywhere. And, we can do this and live New York as it's the new form. And it's still incredible. Don't let COVID be a hesitation for you. We're still going.
Yeah, I would say New York definitely was went through a time with COVID when things were so bad and the streets were empty and it was not, the same New York, but from what I've experienced lately, it's like back and better than ever. And when I think about a post-vaccine New York, I just think of the word resilience and how New Yorkers that are still here are the people that really want to be here and are living and loving the city and staying through the hard times to experience the good times. And so I feel like it's in some ways an improved New York.
I would also, best thing about New York during COVID and even now, like that I find like super helpful for me and for my career and my folks is it is super easy to get tested, super free to get tested, and it's really easy to get a vaccine. And if you're looking for one, but the access to testing is really helpful. In our career in education, working around students, we're tested fairly frequently. We are adapting to a vaccination mandate here in New York City, where all New York City school employees are vaccinated. So the world has changed drastically from a policy lens, but from a safety space, I feel super safe.
Totally.
I feel super safe, and I feel like I have a new son, a 6-month-old son, and he's super cool. And I feel safe with him around too, particularly in these times. So don't let that be something that holds you back.
Yeah, that's great to hear. The city is returning to its old self, so that's good. If there's any other audience questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop your question in the chat.
I can give a quick, just like 2-minute real estate thing. So I work in real estate in Manhattan. Sorry to Tim and the outer boroughs. Love the outer boroughs, but I just don't know enough about them. But if you're interested in moving to Manhattan, a lot of young people have an idea of where they want to live. And they're like, oh, I want to live in the West Village. I want to live in the East Village. I want to live in, Greenwich Village. I want to live in Murray Hill, stuff like that. Great neighborhoods. Those are like the most expensive neighborhoods because everyone wants to live there. What I would encourage you to do is research other neighborhoods in Manhattan, like the Upper East Side, for instance, or the Financial District. The Financial District and Upper East Side are the two most affordable areas of Manhattan, of Southern Manhattan. And then there's also very affordable places in Harlem, Washington Heights, the neighborhoods like that. But again, streeteasy.com, look it up. You can do it right now. Get an idea of what you like, what you don't like, what prices work. It's so funny. Like, people are always surprised that the Upper East Side is affordable. Everyone thinks Gossip Girl, super rich, wealthy people living on the Upper East Side. There is that part of the Upper East Side. Hopefully we'll live there one day. But there is a very affordable section of the Upper East Side that's just like such a pleasure to live in. And then there's also great areas in the outer boroughs as well. I know tons of people that live in Brooklyn and Queens and absolutely love it. But like Tim was saying, it's so overwhelming sometimes. Like, me as a real estate agent, I can't learn every neighborhood. So like Brooklyn and Queens are like Mars to me, in terms of real estate. But I go there, I visit my friends, but it's almost like I'm taking a trip to a city I've never been to. I'm like looking at my phone. I'm like, where do I go? Looking at street signs.
Hey guys. So guys, I'm gonna have to jump off, but I just wanted to say just a little thing. First of all, Emma Boyd, wherever you're at, thank you for the Staten Island love, and I'm really happy to hear that you're in the Bridge Prep neighborhood. Anytime you want to stop by, you can come right over. Tell him you're here to see Mr. Costanza. We'll chat. We'll get some coffee, even though I've already admitted I don't love small talk. But I did put my email in the chat that was directed towards Emma, but for any folks that have questions about anything NYC, particularly if you're into education or policy, or you're wonky about like local political stuff and how it impacts like everybody's living. That's what I love to talk about. So I'm more than happy to take your email and we can hopefully set something up. I just want to thank you guys again for having me. It's always good to talk to Hawks and to hear how we can, you know, help each other out. So thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
All right. Anyone else have any other final questions? All right.
I'm also happy to be a resource, whether it's about how to get to New York, the job search process. It can be a little daunting. One thing I just popped into my head, when you're meeting like at the career fair or like with recruiters at campus, they almost always work for a company. They're almost always stationed at the company's office in Philly, even though it's like an international organization or a big organization. Tell them, hey, yes, I go to St. Joe's and I currently live in Philadelphia, but I don't want to work in Philadelphia. I want to work in New York. If you, the further ahead that you make that clear, the easier it's going to be later down the line in their hiring process. They'll flag you, be like, hey, this person's actually interested in working in our New York office, and it can happen. Trust me.
That's a great point. All right. Oops. Well, thank you guys so much for attending today's webinar, and thanks to Jake and Catherine for their time. We hope you enjoyed hearing our panelists speak a little bit about their experience about living and working in New York. I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank them for sharing their time and expertise. This video was recorded, so will be posted to the Career Development Center YouTube channel with about a week or so. And hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you so much.